Hello, everyone, and welcome to Geekscant, the home of RPG goodness and general tomfoolery. My name is Zach, and today I am joined by my co-host, Shadow Zach. Zach Allen, how you doing?
How's it going?
Good, fantastic. We are going to be doing a little creator interview today, and we have Tommy Sunzenauer with us in the studio. How you doing, Tommy?
Not very good. I have been sick the last few days, so not much work has been done. But I'm getting better now.
Oh,
So
that's good.
hopefully I will be back tomorrow.
That's good. We chatted.
So maybe it shows a little bit, and maybe you can hear it on my voice. But we should be fine.
Yeah, no, you sound great. Sorry to hear you're not feeling super great, but I'm glad that we initially scheduled this chat for last week, and then didn't work out for a few little reasons. So I'm excited that you're game to dive in today. Fantastic. So I think Tommy, did you and I chat like a year ago or so about?
Yeah, I think it was in the beginning of this year.
Yeah.
Right about when we launched the Goblin Gunso project.
Mm-hmm.
And I was ill as well back then, I remember.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's really good timing.
Yeah, we're gonna set a precedent here for sure. Yeah. So you talked about Goblin Gonzo. So if people, if you haven't gone back and listened to that episode, it was really great. We were talking about that project when it came out, and then you had Svump before that, which are kind of Morkborg productions. Though I think Svump is really an adventure book of sorts, and Goblin Gonzo is more of a standalone, like kind of like a hack of Morkborg in the sense that it works on its own. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Goblin Gonzo is it's not taking place in the Mörkborg world. It's more of its own little thing where everybody plays as goblins.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of a different thing and a bit more silly and fun, I think.
Yeah.
Not as dark as the Mörkborg setting.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I have both of those books sitting on my shelf. So you're coming in highly recommended. I'm highly excited about this project. We're here ostensibly because you have another Kickstarter live right now, still with a couple weeks to go, called Obscure, which is a found footage horror RPG.
Correct.
So I'm kind of fascinated as we just dive right in here. Let's just dive right in. I guess there is definitely a through line with your projects in that you start with Morkborg, which is this apocalyptic horror, and then now we're seeing as you maneuver through that system and now into your own in a lot of ways, the horror remains. Is that a key?
The horror will always remain, I think. I'm very much into all kinds of horror stuff, so I think that's inevitable for my projects.
That's
what I
cool.
like to hear.
What?
And as you said, Mörkborg was the third-party license that Mörkborg has was like the thing that it was the thing that got me started on creating my own stuff.
Yeah.
And so now we made two projects in the Mörkborg license. So now I thought it was time to try and make my own thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where Obscure came to be.
Talk to me a little bit. I know you talked a little bit about it in our initial interview, but talk to me a little bit about why horror. Like, what is it about the horror genre and in general, and then also in RPGs that you find is really attractive to you?
I think I just like being scared. I think I don't know what it is. I have always been very attracted to horror in all its forms. All of my favorite movies are horror movies, and it's hard to explain, but there's just something about it that speaks to me, and it's really fun to sit down and write stuff and draw stuff that's just really fucked up.
Yeah. I would say
the more extreme, the better.
Tommy, maybe you'll agree with this. I would say that whether you're talking about tabletop games or movies or a novel or short stories or whatever kind of medium it is, that when you're dealing with different genres, there are certain things that you can do to tug on people's heartstrings and get certain reactions if you're talking about drama or things like that. But the two hardest reactions to get out of people are to make them laugh and to scare them, because no two things are, will affect the same person, the same way. So I think there's something really rewarding when you can write something or create something that you and see it genuinely creep someone out, because that's a tough thing to do.
It's also a genuine reaction, right? Like, it's not up here in the brain. It's in the gut, or it's in the heart, right? In those.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very primitive emotion, right? It's a very strong emotion, fear. So
right.
And with other mediums like film or books or whatever, you definitely can get 100%. There's fantastic stuff over there. The cool thing about RPGs, right, is that it is a more one-to-one with placing the audience member, in this case, the player, in the midst of the horrific thing, right? And asking them to not just observe it, but to be a part of it, which I think is really cool. Yeah.
The level of immersion is just a whole other thing in when you're playing RPGs than when you're just watching a movie, or at least for me. So, and that's also one of the things that I try to focus a lot on this obscure project, is to immerse yourself in it, to engage both the game master and the players, and so everybody is like parting in to tell this story and to taking part in making the story very very.
Yeah.
One of the things that I like about your game and the way that you set it up and having this narrative first way of telling the story and using just the D6 dice pools and keeping it really simple is that, with tabletop games evolving out of war games and becoming what they are, it has been traditionally really hard, at least in my experience, to mold horror to fit what is largely a fantasy genre. And I feel like this game that you've made is kind of taking that step outside of the box and going from tabletop games into what you could consider like horror tabletop role playing, that is its own thing, separate from D&D or any kind of wargaming past that you might be able to place on tabletop games in general.
Exactly. I wanted to make the mechanics and the rules in this game very simple. Of course, it has to be effective and there has to be some dice rolling, but it has to be simple enough so it doesn't get in the way of the storytelling. There's, in my opinion, there's nothing worse than if you're trying to tell a good story, then you have to roll a whole bunch of dice and you have to calculate a lot of things and check up in the rule book and all that stuff. So I wanted to get away from that.
It breaks the tension.
Exactly.
That said, and I agree with that. I think that said, though, I've noticed in other pieces of the campaign and the game, you recognize that sometimes mechanics and the game part of it can provide great solutions to storytelling. As an example here, you talk about how death is not the end, and which is a big hurdle for horror RPGs, right? Whether you're playing the Alien RPG or Merkborg or whatever you're playing, a big question that comes up at almost every table, because someone inadvertently dies way sooner than the end of the story allows, right?
Sure.
And so, in fact, Zach, you and I experienced that last night with a character dying before the end of the campaign, right?
Sure.
And what happens in that space, right? And in horror, that's going to happen more regularly than in other genres typically. And what I love is that you recognize that, okay, we're going to have multiple people sitting around it. This isn't a movie or whatever where it's okay if a character dies and that's the end of that character 20 minutes in or whatever, an hour in. Here, we're recognizing that we're doing this as a group. And so we want to continue doing this as a group while still allowing for character death to be something that happens readily. And so the idea of like, hey, once you die, you flip your character sheet. And there's guidance and directives and rules in a big way for how you as a player can continue on and engage with and be a meaningful part of the story in an ongoing capacity, which I think is very, very good.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that was the goal of that mechanic, that you don't have to, like pausing the game and rolling up a new character and then finding out some weird story about how this character suddenly ended up with the other people who is in here. So now when you die, you just flip the character sheet, and then you roll a die, and it decides if you are going to be a helpful spirit or an evil spirit.
Mhm.
And then you have these different things that you are allowed to do during the rest of the session. So you can really mess with the other players, and of course try to get into it. And at some point when you find it would be appropriate, you just kind of interrupt and say, "But suddenly," and then you tell this thing that's going to happen with the ghost of your dead player, the dead character, not the dead player.
Mhm.
or both. I love
Depends
that.
on how deep
Yeah,
you go.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. Um, one of the other things that I'm curious about, I'm always excited about a new horror RPG coming onto the scene. Zach and I have had a lot of discussions about, whether that's Alien or Morkborg, or even like the Old Gods one that's a little bit different in that way or whatnot. We've had a lot. Something that I find interesting about Obscure is that it is aligning itself enthusiastically with found footage
Mhm.
as an idea. And found footage is, to me, at least when I initially thought about it, found footage is such a visual concept, right? Almost by its definition. And the reason that it works so well in film a lot of times is because it allows the audience to be an observer, but they still have that opportunity of investing themselves a little bit further because it's made to feel like it is something that they're discovering. And
Mhm.
Exactly, it's more of a first person look.
Mhm.
exactly, exactly. It's a first person look, but it's definitely a look. It's a window into a situation, whereas it's recognizing that you are not in the moment, that you are reserved. But the horror still comes from what's happening on here and the idea that maybe this actually happened, as in with Blair Witch or something like that, right? So
Yeah.
how do you? And I know that you talk about this a little bit on the campaign page, but how do you incorporate the idea of found footage into an RPG?
It's it very much relies on the whole setting, the places these different scenarios take place, and also the equipment that you're using. You the game takes place in the 90s, so you roll up your starting equipment, and it can be stuff like a Walkman or a digital camera, a camcorder, a Polaroid camera. There's a lot of cameras and dictaphones and stuff like that. And you very much in this game rely on these things, on the light source from these things,
Mm-hmm.
whether it being a night vision camera or a flashlight. And then you keep track of your batteries as well. So you have to make sure you use the batteries at the right time. So you a lot of times you rely on this camera, on this footage that you're filming, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to see anything. All the scenarios takes place, or most of them, in very dark places, hospital basements or in the middle of the woods and stuff like that. So the 90s technology is a big part of it. And then there's the whole theme, there's a lot of it's heavily inspired by a lot of my favorite found footage movies, especially the Blair Witch Project. So there will be a lot of settings that you will recognize from a lot of these movies, and there will be a lot of references and stuff like that.
It's interesting. Zach and I just finished for October a horror movie marathon, and several of the movies that Zach recommended that I made my way through was the VHS series.
Yeah.
And seeing that reference, I'm excited because I think what you mentioned as your kind of your reference points are the same things that I think most people will see as a reference point, which I think is always great for an RPG when you can say, hey, if you like these things, or if this is your jam, or if you're familiar, this is going to be a great touch point for you to
Exactly.
easily insert yourself into this, because you are asking the audience to take a different role here, right? We're not being the passive observer that's watching the found footage. We are
You're the one that records it.
exactly.
But
And so
there's also this other element that in the a big part of these scenarios that is in the main book, the core book. They also, if you want to find out what went on in this place and how the haunting began, or what it is that's happening, you have to collect these pieces of found footage. And then there's if you find an old videotape, there will be just a brief description with like almost like prompts in it, and then it's you can give it to the player, and the player can then tell their version of what do they see on these tapes from the given prompts. So that once again makes the players engage in the story in a different way.
Interesting.
Oh man, I mean, you know, Zach and I are jacked. Like anytime I can get a new experience out of an RPG, that's what I want. And I am not a big. The reality is, I don't play a lot of video games, but I have always been fascinated with the idea in some of these horror games that are you being the person with the camera going into the place and being
like Outlast.
Exactly, like Outlast. Yeah, that's been a fascinating idea concept. And to me, knowing that I will probably never choose to have the opportunity to be in the video game side of this, I am enthusiastic about you finding a way of porting over that experience into an RPG, which I am myself am much more likely to engage with. I also think that like the other thing that excites me about a project like this, and I'm kind of maybe talking less to you two and maybe to the listening audience at this point, but one of the things that I like about this sort of a project is horror. I find is fantastic as a get in, get out RPG. You can not to say that there isn't long campaigns, and we haven't all done long campaigns for it, but near and dear to my heart is the RPG that can feel like an entire experience in a one shot or 3 sessions or 5 sessions, and actually you walk away from it being like, I got that experience. I got a new experience there. And to me, this is offering a new experience in RPG form that isn't also asking for, like some other games, a half a year of your time to get that experience.
No, this Obscure is actually specifically made for one-shot games. I want to, I since I launched the campaign, I have actually written rules for some additional and optional rules for campaign plays, like inventory slots and stuff like that. But the main game is made for one-shots because I want it to be like, as I also wrote in the Kickstarter text, like telling a ghost story around the campfire, or putting on a horror movie and watching it from start till end, and then walk away from it again.
Exactly.
In the game, in the campaign, you talk about, I'm referencing it here on my phone for people who are following along, but some of the bullets you talk about, 4 scenarios are included in the book and pre-made characters. There you also mentioned character creation. So do you think if you were gonna put this book in the hands of a new of an RPG enthusiast, but someone who has never played it before, is your ideal scenario that they would play this with the adventures provided with pre-gens and kind of a package thing, and then kind of walk from that into exploring their own stories, or do you see the book as really start with creating your own and telling your own things, and that kind of that DIY mentality from the get-go? Because there's in the last few years we definitely see RPGs that are designed to be, here's an experience that I have created from the ground up for you, versus here's a toolkit, go do it on your own, is the ideal.
Yeah, my hope is that it's going to be more of a toolkit. I want people to create their own stuff for it as well. I made these scenarios to show people my vision of what the game could be. But of course, I made a whole section in the book that's actually like GM tools, or tools for making your own scenarios, and how you can make this various equipment haunted, and there's also tips for how you can scare your players, and I want to make it like an open license game so people can create their own stuff for it. But I wanted to have some of my own scenarios in it for people to, so people can pick it up and play.
Zach, I've got a couple other things here that I want to make sure that we cover, but you have anything else that you that is coming to mind right now?
I do, but I haven't fully formed the question, so go ahead.
Perfect. So I want to talk a little bit about, and we're always careful in these types of interviews to not like focus too heavy on what's the Kickstarter, because you can go check that out yourself for the next couple weeks. But there's a couple of very interesting things that I wanted to bring up, and I'm just curious. There may be a question of why in some ways, and not because they're very cool and interesting. One of them is the book itself. You made it. This is a weird nerdy question, but you made it a square. And
Yeah.
anytime I see a book that's like an oddly shaped thing, my first question is, that's interesting. That's definitely different. Why did you choose that? Is there a specific reason, or just you fell in love with the shape?
Oh, you got me there. It's I just wanted to make a different format than I'm used to. Usually, I'm always making these A5,
Yeah.
and I wanted to. I think this is going to be a very different game, and I wanted to show that in the whole layout and the design. And I just like squares.
Yeah.
It just looks good.
Yeah. Well, that's it. That's my favorite answer.
I don't have any better explanation for it than it's just a design choice. I like how it looks.
Yeah. I don't have I have zero problems with it, and in fact, I'm enthusiastic about it. It's always cool though. One of my favorite chats about this. I was talking with Chris Birch of Modifius, and they have a whole bunch of amazing projects and products like Fallout and Dune and things, and 90% of everything is the 8.5 by 11 kind of standard hardcover, right? And then everything in their 2D20 line is that, except for John Carter, which is this weird like landscape build.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, why did you choose to do the landscape build for John Carter when everything else in the 2D20 line is, the standard format? And his answer was, because we could and we thought it looked cool. And I'm like,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
that's such the perfect, pure, genuine answer, and it
I
communicates.
think I actually that there are I started out by making some of the graphics for the book, and it is like screenshots from surveillance cameras and Polaroid photos and stuff. So they were going to be square.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I think that's how I started laying the book out as the square format. Also, like, because it's a very different format, it's not a lot of books that has this total square.
Mhm.
And then I have some kind of hope when if people are going to make some supplements for it or making their own scenarios, that they will use the same format. So you have like this.
Yeah. Well, you have the third
That's
party.
me.
You have the third party license, and part of the license agreement is that you must make your book. Your
You
product
must make it in a square.
you must make it in a
Exactly.
square. Yeah. The other piece to this, and I'm sure it has similar answer, but I'm not typically a person who like goes in for dice. Typically, I'm not a dice goblin, right? But I was looking at the dice that you're offering on this page, and first off, I will say they have everything that I want in a dice if I'm gonna pick them up, which is they have high contrast, which is kind of a nerd thing, I guess, but like I can read the numbers very easily, but the font's
Mhm.
cool and original. But you have these really two cool icons on them, which I believe correlate to energy and anxiety dice and kind of differentiating between the two.
Exactly.
But
You can use totally normal D6. These are normal D6s.
yeah.
They're just looking awesome.
Yeah.
I have this the creepy face on the black die.
Mhm.
That's the symbol I use in the book for when I write the scenarios. As a reminder for the game master, I put this little face next to some of the scenes. As a reminder, this would be a good spot to give out some anxiety points.
Yeah.
And when you play the game, you need two different, or you need to be able to differentiate the two kinds of D6s that you have. So this is just an opportunity to buy, two different kinds of D6 that matches the theme of the game.
Perfect.
You can definitely use totally normal D6 dice.
It's highly effective, though. One of the things that I noticed. So I hope you don't mind, Tommy, when I keep referencing other games, but I'm referencing
Oh,
it
it's
in a
fine.
good way towards you. At least that's my feeling. So Zach and I have just played in the past so long, Alien and then Blade Runner.
Yeah,
And Alien has a very similar D6 dice pool system in the sense that it has
I
stress
stole a
die.
little bit from you.
Exactly.
Yeah,
But I
you
mean,
got me.
the thing about the Alien system is, in my estimation, it's the greatest conversion of an IP to an RPG ever. And a huge part of that is the stress die. And I would argue that even a bigger part of that, or along with that, is the fact that on those stress die, the one is replaced with
It's the
a
face
face
hugger.
hugger, right?
Yeah.
And the thing that is different. So then we play Blade Runner, and in Blade Runner we played on the virtual tabletop, and it has a similar facet. Sometimes when you roll a 1 on certain die or whatever, like something can happen, right? It's not the same thing, but what I noticed last night as we were playing Blade Runner is the players don't have that immediate visceral gut reaction to seeing a 1
No.
up on the dice, even though it's bad. There's not a gut reaction of "oh no" as much as when the face hugger icon comes up on
Mhm.
a d6. I think the same thing is going to be true with these dice, and that's why, like, to me, I'm
Exactly.
drawn to this type of die. Is that it's not just, oh, this icon is cool. It is cool, but it also is meant to be a shortcut to that emotive response, get you away from a number when it matters. And
Exactly. It's when you get a 1 on the anxiety die, something very bad will happen. So it's a kind of an important mechanic in the game. So it was also important when you roll these black die that you can clearly see this creepy face smiling at you. Then you know you are doomed.
yeah, yes. Oh, that's. I mean, listen. That's exactly what I wanted, and I'm so jacked about these dice, and I don't know that I have ever said that. If I have, it's been once before. But like, to me, it's exactly it shows me that somebody took the time to think about what would actually enhance this experience and
Mhm.
found add-ons that will actually do that. So I'm
I really tried to minimize the add-ons for this project.
mhm.
In Goblin Gonzo, we went all in and we had dice and posters and a cassette tape and all kinds of shit. This time I wanted to keep it simple,
Mhm.
but I couldn't help myself with the dice.
Well, they're super cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Zach, did I give you enough time to conjure? If not, no big deal.
Oh yeah, yeah. So I guess the question that I have is, from a creative standpoint, analog found footage and especially analog horror, a lot of times can just be about you, the viewer, interacting with a piece of media, and beyond that, you might have 1 to 2 figures that you're following. How did you tackle the problem of putting a larger party like that together, and trying to keep that feeling of isolation and being so alone that really I feel is part of analog and found footage horror?
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that I have found works very well is I put these things in the book as well, like tools and suggestions for how to run the game in the way that's not that it's meant to, but how I imagine you run the game.
Mm-hmm.
It is to like separate your players, and on purpose I make a lot of in the scenarios that I'm writing. I make a lot of scenes where it's possible for the GM to separate the players, and
Mm-hmm.
also because you're because the light from your devices is so important. Not everyone will have a flashlight. Maybe only one guy in the party of 4 or 5 people will have a flashlight or a camcorder.
Mm-hmm.
So the rest will just follow behind this person, and this person will have to tell them the others what they see, and the others
Aha.
maybe hear something behind them, or they feel another presence or something, but they can't see anything. So I'm trying to the separation of the players and the necessity of these devices.
That's fascinating though, because if you're a party of even 5 players and they're all still grouped together in a room though, and only say one guy had a flashlight, but his batteries are dead now, and you're just relying on the guy with the camcorder and what he can see through it, and it's pitch black, and he has to describe what he's seeing to the other players. That's really cool. I love that.
So, I think at this point, I like letting these interviews kind of build to a crescendo of like Zach or whoever it is with me getting excited, and then I say, okay, how do we fulfill this excitement? So obviously there's a Kickstarter going on right now. I looked on the Kickstarter page and it looks like people are going to be able to play this game in February. Am I right in that? If you miss this Kickstarter, or even if you back it, like February is kind of the release date.
That will be, at least for the digital version, it will be out before February. That is my goal. And I'm working on this project full time now. So things are going very fast, and the fundings are good. That means that I can afford hiring a good editor, so I don't have to spend all my time and energy on writing in the correct grammar, because obviously English is not my first language.
Sure.
so that makes the process a bit easier for me as well. And
yeah. Well, listen, I'm gonna make a commitment right now, and again, I rarely do this. But this is so up my alley, and I think it's so up Zach's alley, that I'm going to commit to, as soon as I can get my hands on this, we're going to schedule a one-shot, and we're going to do a game of this, because we're fully on board, fully excited.
Awesome.
And I cannot wait. I cannot wait to get my hands on Obscure. So thank you for chatting with us, Tommy. This has been really great.
Yeah, thank you guys, and thanks for having me on again.
Absolutely. So listen, folks, I mean, we could sit here and talk for a while. The cool thing is that I've got another creator, Gabrielle, that's gonna come on and chat with us here later this afternoon.
Oh.
But the reality is, I think anything more we say it's just gonna reinforce the statements that we've already made, which is that we feel like this is something unique, this is something new, this is something clever. It's got time put into it. It looks fantastic. So all those reasons, we're gonna highly recommend you go check this out and back this project. Like I said, we're recording this on the 14th of November. It has 16 days left to go, so it's going to the end of the month. Tommy, is there any part of this Kickstarter that you want people to be aware of to kind of encourage them to go back it now?
I think they should just go check out the Kickstarter, scroll through it, look at the images, read something if you want, and then back it.
That's right. So I will say then, I agree with that. I will say, because we do get questions on this, digital is going to be about $8. The digital plus the analog version, the physical version, is going to be $22. And if you want this sweet dice set, which is 12 dice, and the book it's together, that's going to be $38. So a steal at any level.
Absolutely.
Go check it out. Again, Tommy, thanks for hanging out. Last question for you. If people listen to this afterwards, where is a good place for them to go check you out or look for your stuff?
Yeah, I have my company with my partner that's called Black Games, but this project, Obscure, it's my own thing. So you will have to follow me on some of the social media. So I have a page called Obscure RPG on Facebook. That will probably be the place to find me and to find the book.
Perfect. Well, thanks a lot, Tommy, and good luck.
Thank you.